some estimates, as many as 40% of adults over the age of 65 will have some form of memory impairment. Now, some will progress all the way up to dementia or Alzheimer's, but for most of us, the frustrations really do start and stop with remembering where we left our keys or somebody's name. Either way, it is irritating and downright frustrating. So the question is, what can be done to stop all of this? Can you get that memory back? Possibly, and a lot of that has to do with what it is that you are eating. Dr. Neil Barnard is here with us today. He is the author of Your Body in Balance, and he will be sharing the foods that you should be eating right now that can help sharpen your memory. And of course, you're also going to learn the foods that you're going to want to remember not to eat because they may, in fact, make your memory worse. And if there's something that you would like to ask Dr. Barnard, go ahead and post your question right now in the comment or in the chat. We're going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag and getting to as many of your questions as we possibly can here on the show today. You can also send them on social, Twitter, or Instagram. I'm at Chuck Carroll, WLC. So let's talk memory right now, and welcome in Dr. Neil Barnard. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Chuck.
Would you agree with that 40% estimate? I got that from a professor who released some research at UCLA, and 40% to me seems to be about right once you reach that certain age.
Well, yes, and it's not the same percentage with each age. So mid-60s, a little bit lower, but once you get to mid-70s and especially mid-80s and beyond, it gets higher. So yeah, it's definitely something where we want to take action.
And how closely connected is diet and cognitive impairment or cognitive function? Do they really go hand in hand?
Very strongly connected. Now I couldn't have made that statement back in, say, 1980, because we were sort of speculating if you're old or if you got bad genes, that's what's going to bring on the dementia. But we now know that foods play a huge role, and the reason we know that is studies like the Chicago Health and Aging Project, which got started back in the 90s. And researchers in Chicago brought in a whole group of people. They tracked what they ate for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then they tracked who stayed mentally clear as the years went by and who didn't. And certain patterns emerged. There are definitely foods that seem to accelerate dementia, and there are others that are protected.
Let's start with the good then. Least question, which foods can help to improve memory?
So there's a whole list of things that are helpful, and as you're hinting, there are also some bad ones that you want to get away from. But the good thing, first of all, let's just sing some praises for vegetables and fruits just in general. Researchers in Chicago started tracking people's cognitive decline. Are you kind of slipping as the years go by? And the people who just never met a vegetable that they liked, they just didn't include them in their diet at all, they had a much faster cognitive decline compared to people who ate vegetables and fruits, even if it was one serving per day. What's the difference? The difference, let's say you have a person who's eating about a serving per day. Over time, compared to a person who doesn't eat vegetables at all, it's a difference of about 11 years of cognitive aging. So a person who's 80 will be more like a person who's 69 if they're eating a vegetable. But that's just the beginning. Let's say a word for specific kinds of fruit. If you look at a blueberry, that dark purple color comes from what are called anthocyanins. This is a whole big group of pigments. It's the same ones that nature brings out in the fall in the colored leaves on the trees. But anthocyanins in a certain form are in blueberries. And they are antioxidants that protect the berry. They appear to protect you too. University of Cincinnati researchers brought in people who were already up in years. They were already having some memory issues, and they gave them blueberry juice, a cup of it in the morning, a cup later in the day, that kind of thing. And they found significant benefits from that. But it doesn't have to be blueberries. Anything that's got that dark purplish color, like grapes, same thing. And one last food to mention, and this is a little bit of a mixed bag. Let's say I have some almonds or some walnuts. They've got vitamin E in them. That vitamin E is a protector, and people in Chicago eating the most vitamin E, not pills, vitamin E-rich foods, cut their risk of Alzheimer's in half. The reason I say it's a little controversial is these are also the fattiest foods we have. And so if people are overdoing it on the nuts, they're going to gain weight. So my rule of thumb is about an ounce a day, and that gives you a long way toward the vitamin E that's going to protect your brain.
Let's talk about fatty acids. A lot of people are wondering about omega-3s. the majority of people think omega-3, they think fish, but they want to eat that plant-based diet. So a two-parter then is how important are omega-3s for brain health, and two, what are some good plant-based sources?
Yeah, great question, Josh. You do need them, but you do not need fish at all. My favorite source of omega-3 is going to surprise you, green leafy vegetables. You send some broccoli to a laboratory, and you think, there isn't any fat in this, is there? They'll say, well, as a matter of fact, there are traces. Maybe 7 or 8% of the fat in green leafy vegetables comes from, 7 or 8% of the calories come from fat, and a big percentage of that is good fat, specifically omega-3. And these are neglected in America's diet, but if you bring them back in, you're going to get the healthiest source of omega-3. And then some people want to go in a different way. They want to go supplements. You go to the store, they have the fish oil omega-3. Right next to it, they've got this vegan omega-3, which is made from algae. Healthier than the fish oil part, certainly cleaner, and obviously more ethical too. And it's got the EPA and the DHA, just like the fish, only it's healthier source.
All right, so we've kind of talked about the good. Now let's talk about the bad. And I'm just going to ask you, if somebody is going to the drive-thru for lunch every single day, then coming home ordering pizza, what is their risk of having some sort of cognitive impairment, whether it be dementia, Alzheimer's, or even just mild cognitive impairment, compared to somebody who is eating a healthier plant-based diet?
It's at least 2 or 3 times higher. And that's just because of the saturated fat part. This is one of the big headlines that came out of the Chicago Health and Aging Project. They looked at people who ate a lot of saturated fat. That's the solid fat that's in, say, bacon grease, for example, or in dairy fat. And the people who tended to avoid that, they just weren't going for the bacon, they weren't doing the cheese. Those people cut their risk of Alzheimer's by, half or to a third what it would otherwise have been. So if you want to avoid one thing, it's to avoid things that are high in saturated fat. Number one, that's the dairy group, cheese, whole milk, whole yogurt, that kind of thing. And then number 2 is the meat group. And by the way, when I'm talking about the meat group, even fish, if you get salmon, yeah, it has omega-3, but it has a surprising amount of saturated fat too. It's a real mixed bag if you're better off that.
And we have a few people wondering about those healthier plant-based sources of fat. You were talking about nuts earlier, and avocados have been raised a time or two now in the chat as well. Just for the newbies out there, how does their fat compare to the fat from a cheeseburger in terms of, total fat and saturated fat?
Okay, the total fat, in most plants, there's very little of any kind of fat, really. I'm talking about beans, vegetables, fruits, whole grains. But the exceptions are exactly what you mentioned. The nuts, seeds, the avocados, the guacamole, and so forth. Now, their saving grace is that it's a much healthier kind of fat, meaning much, much lower in the bad fat, in the saturated fat, much lower. Even so, if a person's trying to trim their waistline, you don't want it to be a big guac fat, because even though you're not getting too much saturated fat, you're still getting calories, which are concentrated in that.
All right, let's take a question here from Lisa at 1219. She's wondering, what about coconut products? It's in all sorts of vegan products, but it has a ton of saturated fat. So what's the stance there?
You got it, exactly. Coconut fat is marketed like crazy. Same with palm fat, palm oil. It's heavily marketed, but you are exactly right. It's very high in saturated fat, says so right on the label, and it'll do probably 2 things. Number 1 is it will raise your cholesterol. People may think, oh no, it's natural, it doesn't. It will, believe it. Saturated fat, even from coconuts, yes, it will raise your cholesterol, same with palm oil. And it is very likely also linked to Alzheimer's, just like pork fat. So coconut fat, we need it. And if a product has it in it, don't buy it. Same with palm oil. They are, as I say, marketed. There are products everywhere nowadays, but I would read the label and I would leave them out of your grocery cart.
All right, and Mary on YouTube, this is great. She's like, wait. Are you really telling me that the kale in my garden right now has omega-3s in it?
It does, and it's just waiting for you. It sure does. The specific omega-3 is called alpha-linolenic acid. It's the kale is really smart. It knows how to make it from the elements in the earth and carbon dioxide that pulls out of the air, and it makes that omega-3 for you, and your body will make it from it.
take a question from Annie, who is wondering whether mild cognitive impairment is in fact reversible.
Probably, yes. For people who don't know what we're talking about, mild cognitive impairment, you're still you. You know, this is not where the brain has been destroyed. You're still you. But what you're noticing is that names are dropping out, especially names and words. And you know, that can happen to anybody. But if it's happening every day, if it's happening throughout the day, and it's really interfering with your life, that's mild cognitive impairment. And there have been a couple of studies. I mentioned anthocyanins earlier. That's the purple coloring in blueberries and in grapes. And researchers have found that when people up their intake of those pigments in particular, say a cup of just, you know, ordinary Concord grape juice in the morning, another one in the evening, that they do show over about a 90-day period improvements in memory for people who have mild cognitive impairment. The other big area here has been in exercise, that researchers have looked at individuals who had their memory kind of sputtering, and they said, okay, in addition to a healthy diet, let's lace up your sneakers. And they found that that can help too, and the amount that has been shown to help is about a 40-minute brisk walk 3 times a week. So that's doable for most people. Start small, especially if you have joint issues or your heart's not quite up to it, get your doctor's green light, but if you can work your way up to a 40-minute brisk walk. A brisk walk is not a tread. It's also not running so fast you can't speed. Just a good brisk walk, 40 minutes 3 times.
How concerned do you think somebody should be if they are even, you know, as young as in their 30s up to their 50s? Definitely below that 65-year threshold we were talking about earlier. And they are, like, they kind of, at least once a week or so, have trouble finding the right words, remembering somebody's name when they've known that person for years. And this does happen, you know, like about once a week. Like, what level of concern should they have at that point?
I'm concerned you're working too hard. You do not have mild cognitive impairment. That's not a once-a-week kind of thing. But what is happening, and you're putting your finger on it, is you are probably stressed out and you're probably not sleeping. And that's one of the things that young people have problems with all the time. Either we've got work demands, or family demands, or frankly, what we're doing is just too darn interesting. If you know, you're watching TV or reading a book or something like that, and so people aren't getting sleeping, your brain is exquisitely sensitive to sleep deprivation. And this is really important. At the beginning of the night, you lie down, and your brain has some jobs that it has to do at night. One is it has to sort out the things that have occurred to you during the day. You've learned some things, you've had experience, you might have learned a new word. At the beginning of the night, it's just like a jumble of files all over your desk. Your brain has to sort it out, and then memorizing means filing things in a place you can find them again. And that's called slow wave sleep. The word comes from the fact that we put EEG leads on a person's scalp, and you can see the waves going along as the brain is doing this sorting process. And then at the end of the night, at 3, 4, 5 a.m., the brain's got a different job, and that's REM, rapid eye movement. And if you look at a person in a laboratory, you can see through their eyelids, their eyes darting around because they're dreaming about it. And that's when the brain is sorting out emotional issues. Yes, it's true. Your brain's got to make sense of all the goofy things that happened yesterday. And also physical things, like playing the guitar or your tennis game, something like that. Those things are concentrated during rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, so we're young people, we're partying all night long, you're not sleeping, you do this a couple days in a row, you have lost the slow wave sleep, so now you can't remember anything, and because you've lost the REM sleep, you're grumpy. It takes several days of appropriate sleep to get back on track, and my rule of thumb, do this. You'll see this work. 10 o'clock, go to sleep. Doesn't matter how many emails you may have or how good the book or documentary is. 10 o'clock, go to sleep. And you will discover, after like 2 or 3 days, your mental clarity comes back and those lapses.
You go to sleep around 9:30.
Pete is wondering whether you would say that diet is as important for memory function as sleep, or how do those two compare?
They're both really critically important. It's like, let's say, lung cancer. Is it more important to not be exposed to asbestos or more important to not be exposed to cigarettes? I mean, they're both an issue. And if a person is eating badly or not sleeping, they both concern the brain. But they work together. If you're not sleeping, whether you doing? Chances are you're at the drive-thru, or you're in your refrigerator or something like that. One of the great things about being unconscious is you can't be eating ice cream. So sleeping, you know what I'm talking about. Sleeping and eating healthfully, they work hand in hand.
Oh, that is the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. What is the health benefit of sleep? Not eating ice cream. Oh, that amuses me to no end.
It's the truth, you know, Chuck. You know exactly what I mean. If you're unconscious, nothing bad's going to happen.
There you go. Housekeeping question here. Mary YAAAAAY Morgan, great name. She's like, okay, so you said that kale's got omega-3, but what about collard greens?
Yeah, the whole family of green leafy vegetables will be selling, and you pick collard, kale, broccoli, cauliflower. They're all in the cruciferous family, which has not just the omega-3, but lots of other good things in them, including cancer fighters. They have deeply colored pigments that protect the retina against macular degeneration. So it's really good to find a way to make greens part of your life. Some people, like me, even include them in their breakfast. It sounds funny, but what you'll discover is you kind of get into this groove of making sure they're part of your life. You'll enjoy them. Quick tip, if greens just seem kind of bitter, you don't want to have them, add some seasoned red vinegar, balsamic vinegar, a little bit of Bragg aminos. I don't know if you've seen at the health food store right next to the soy sauce. Spray on some Bragg, or even just open up a lemon and dribble it on there. The slight bitterness of the green vegetable adds to the sourness of the lemon, and they cancel each other out. And some kind of sweet thing that you will come to love.
Look at that. That is kitchen science right there. Okay.
It works. It works. Trust me. You'll see. And if you don't have green leafy vegetables, you think, where are they? This is not unusual. You want to have them.
I'm going to try that. I'm putting that one to the test this week for sure. No doubt about it. So we're talking about keeping fat low, and that being important for memory function. We add oil into the equation, and Keith has a great question. Sent this one from YouTube at 12:22. He says, why is sunflower oil not good for us, but sunflower seeds are?
Well, the seed has a little bit of oil, but it has a whole lot of other things in it too. It's also complex carbohydrates. It has some
The oil doesn't
it
have
has a whole lot of
fiber.
fiber. So this is true in anything. You take you can use an olive, or 2 olives, or 3 or 4 or 5. But if you have olive oil, that was a whole lot of olive. So they pressed up the oil and they threw away everything else, all the salt, all the fiber, all the nutrients. And so you're better off with the whole package.
And one more about omega-3s and the cooking process. When you're cooking these foods, if you're cooking those collard greens, are you cooking the omega-3s right out of them, or do they retain throughout the cooking process?
They'll still be there. Your senses are right that it's useful to have some raw vegetable soup in your routine. And we used to be a little bit worried about this actually with the cruciferous vegetables. We thought if they're raw, they could be harmful. Probably not. They're probably okay either way. So some raw, some cooked.
All right, let's take the memory conversation now a step further and take a question from Krista, who was wondering, why is it that Alzheimer's disease is called type 3 diabetes?
Type 3 diabetes, for people who don't know what we're talking about, type 1 means this is the diabetes that typically arises in children or young adults where the pancreas, which makes insulin, has stopped making insulin. The insulin-producing cells are gone, and so a person has type 1 diabetes, no insulin. Type 2 means your body's making insulin, but your cells are resistant to it, and that insulin resistance leads to type 2 diabetes. Your blood sugar rises because the insulin's not doing its job. Type 3 is kind of a made-up term, but people are using it to say, well, in Alzheimer's disease, there's a problem with blood sugar control too, and that's that now the cells of the brain seem to be resistant to insulin. Just like in type 2, it's the muscle cells and the liver cells that are not responding to blood sugar. So that's what they're talking about. And this is an area of active research here, but it really means that one of the contributors or one of the signs that's going along with Alzheimer's disease may be a disruption of sugar control within the brain. So stay tuned.
And Hamari is wondering what percentage, in your estimation, of Alzheimer's cases are preventable?
What a great question. We can't give a precise answer, but let me give you some things you can put into the equation. Way back when researchers realized that there are certain genes that can increase the risk of Alzheimer's, we got really sad. The ApoE4 gene, or ApoE4 allele, is what it's called. If you got it from one parent, your risk of Alzheimer's is triple. If you got it from mom and dad, your risk of developing Alzheimer's is about 10 times higher, or maybe even 15. So that gave us kind of a death sentence. We thought, all right, this is nothing. Researchers went further though, and they started to notice that even with people who have genetic risk, lifestyle factors seem to make a difference. And the biggest lifestyle factor is food. Okay, so let's go back to Chicago, which I was mentioning earlier. They noticed that the people who were eating a really low saturated fat diet, that's the non-dairy, non-meat diet, or as close to it as you can get. I mentioned earlier that they were cutting their risk in half, maybe about a third. Whatever, like just from that one step alone. Let's say we also avoid trans fats. Trans fats are in snack food, cupcakes, that kind of stuff. If you avoid that, that cuts about 80% of the risk out as well, compared to the people who eat a lot of it. And then we're going to add vitamin E, which I was mentioning earlier, that cuts the risk about 60%. And let's say I exercise. If I put all these things together, my guess is that our risk of developing Alzheimer's is cut probably maybe about 80%, either prevented or greatly delayed. And I'm going to suggest that that may even be independent of genetic risk that a person has. Now, we need much more research to make sure that this gets put to a good test, but all of the epidemiologic studies would suggest that probably something in that
80%, that is, I'd say, statistically significant. You think about playing the lottery, anybody would go out and buy a lottery ticket if they had an 80% chance of winning. So as far as I'm concerned, I hear that 80% and I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that I'm hitting all 80% of that 80%, you know?
Well, Chuck, absolutely. And if you ever had a parent, a grandparent, a friend, somebody else you knew who developed Alzheimer's disease, I mean, they lose everything that ever mattered to them. And there are all kinds of other things that people have added to the mix. There was a fascinating study in Canada where they were looking now not at diet and not at physical exercise. They were looking at what I'm going to call intellectual exercise. But the way they quantified it was how many languages do you speak? In Canada, there are people who speak one language, there are people who speak two, there are people who speak three, even four. But a fair number of people are bilingual, English, French. And they then tracked people and looked at how they did on. And just speaking two languages as opposed to one would delay cognitive decline by about 5 years just for that alone. So you think, okay, wait a minute, note to self, eat healthfully, lace up my speakers, get my sort of the linguistic neurology working in my brain. All of these things will help. I don't think anything is perfect, and bad things can happen no matter what, but we want to get all the protections in our corner that we possibly can.
All right, let's switch gears here, go back to regular brain health here. Mimi is wondering about eggs and brain health. Specifically, she mentioned that she was told that eggs have a lot of choline in there. Choline, apparently good for memory. Is that accurate?
Well, choline is needed. There's a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, and it's one of many neurotransmitters in the brain, and choline goes into it. And eggs do have choline. However, eggs also have a lot of saturated fat. That's the very thing that we were indicting earlier. If you have 2 eggs, you get more than 3 grams of saturated fat on your plate. So if you want a source of choline, have vegetables, have fruits, have beans. They will give you choline without that fat.
And you talked a lot about menopause in your book, Your Body in Balance. And Karen has an interesting question at 1226, if we can pull that up. She's wondering, what about your memory when you're going through menopause? Is there anything that she could be eating, anything she could be doing to help alleviate those concerns?
Oh, great question. As you probably know, and as we've discussed in Your Body in Balance and in our research just that time, is that diet can make such a big difference in menopausal symptoms. We focused especially on what we call the vasomotor symptoms. That's the hot flashes, the crazy, And there, as you may remember, there were really 3 steps. It was a completely plant-based diet, keeping oils low, and taking advantage of soybeans. We used non-GMO soybeans half a cup a day, and found that that combination, vegan diet, low oil, half cup soybeans, just really knocked out the hot flashes for a great many women. But as part of this research, we also looked at mood change, and how people felt physically, and even how people felt sexually. And we found that in all of those areas, there was substantial improvement. Now, menopause is, people call it sort of a passage, and it really is, and that means that kind of no matter what you do, things are sooner or later going to get better. But what we have also found is that when people are on this healthy diet I'm describing, a lot of that roller coaster just gets smoothed out in a really good way.
Comment from Caprice, 1234, 80%, wow, we have control. Yeah, man, that's what the show is about. It's about raising the health IQ and feeling empowered. So, excellent. Glad you're picking up what we're putting down. Interesting question here from Brian. When you talk about brain health, a lot of people now talk about concussion. You can't flip through the sports page or the newspaper, go online without hearing about concussion. And Brian is wondering whether there have been any studies on diet and concussion recovery.
A lot has been written about it. I have to say, in my view, it's mostly speculative. But the whole idea is your brain has had a physical injury. It's got to recover. The recovery is slow. Part of the recovery process is an inflammatory process. Anytime you have any kind of injury, you whack yourself with a hammer. The first thing is swells up, it turns red. That's inflammation, and inflammation happens in the brain too. So if inflammation goes over time, it can damage the brain or any other part of the body where it's occurring. So people have advocated for anti-inflammatory diets. That really means a diet that's very heavy on the vegetables and on the fruits. Those are good anti-inflammatory foods, and they are used very strongly and persuasively to avoid things like dairy, animal-derived products in general, those are pro-inflammatory. It's good advice. I think we need more testing of it, but it certainly makes sense in a lot of them in the diet. And then the other area that some people have gone through, and here I think it's also speculative, is what will happen with certain supplements. Turmeric has been looked at. Resveratrol, which is something that's been great, and you'll also see it as a health food store in a capsule. These are being tested too with the same kind of thing in mind, that they are going to chill out the inflammatory process and help brain recovery. Stay tuned. I think we need more research, but there's no reason not to put these to work. They're certainly safe, and hopefully they will.
Look forward to seeing more of that research. Certainly there's so much being done on concussions right now. I think over the next decade, we're really going to blow the roof off of that. Hopefully get a quality answer there. Question from Claudia. I work overnight as a nurse. What can I do to, 1, keep my brain in check, and 2, avoid becoming overweight? Which foods should I be avoiding here?
Okay, great question. I'm wondering if what you're thinking about is really 2 things. One is that your day-night schedule might be getting goofed up. If sometimes you're working during the day and then other times you're working at night, it's much harder than if you're a consistent night or consistent day. Your body needs to be able to get that good night's sleep, or if you're a night worker, a good day's sleep, and without it, you're just not going to be yourself. That's the first thing. The second thing is you're trapped at work. It's the middle of the night, and the cafeteria is closed. Or the snack machine is right there. And so a lot of the problem that we have with shift workers is that the availability of food tends to lean toward the really unhealthy choices. So the best thing to do, needless to say, is to bring something with you. And that means really planning ahead and having it ready. And it really should be something without animal products. So vegetables and fruits and whole grains and beans, they are your friends. And so if that means that you're going to have a simple vegan lasagna that you're bringing with you in a Pyrex bowl and you zap it in the microwave at work, fair enough. Or if it's a hummus sandwich or a stir fry or whatever it is, make a little bit of extra during the day. You can portion it out and bring it with you at night. But bringing food with you will save your life a whole lot of time.
We were talking about blueberries earlier in the show. Christy is wondering whether wild blueberries would be a healthier option than traditional.
They both seem to be fine. You know, it's funny, when this research was done, exactly what you think. You think it's got to be organic, it's got to, whatever. Maybe so. theoretically there are advantages to something that's made without pesticides. But the studies that have been done, particularly the ones that were published in the University of Cincinnati and there's quite a lot of press, they use ordinary Concord grapes, the kind that would be on the shelf, you know, Welch's brand grapes, that kind of stuff, which I don't believe is organic, but seems to do the trick. And that's because it's not the trace of pesticides that were used.
You're awesome.
Presumably, that big dose of anthocyanins
You're
will make it
appreciated.
purple, and that's there regardless of how it's raised, and that seems to be protected to the plant.
I want to say hi to Rochelle, who's watching right now, as well as Sherry J, who's watching. And Randy, thank you guys so very much for being some of the exam roomies who are tuned in today. Let's take a hard right turn here and talk about something completely different as we have the doctor's mailbag open. It can be a grab bag. Question from Barbara, wondering whether a vegan diet can help with lupus.
Yes, very likely. Lupus is an autoimmune condition, like many others, like rheumatoid arthritis or many thyroid and many other conditions as well. And a lot of people have discovered when they change their diet, their lupus improves. And what we believe is happening is that certain foods, the proteins in these foods are mistaken by your body for an invader. Your body will recognize, say, a virus, and it makes antibodies to kill the virus. Well, let's say your body happens to come upon dairy protein from a cheese sandwich that you make. The body says, what's that protein? Because that'd be a virus that makes an antibody to try to knock it out, and those antibodies are still circulating in your blood. And then they can hit your various body parts and cause an inflammatory reaction there. And that's what we're seeing with lupus. So when people get away from dairy, is probably the number one offender, but there are others too. When they get away from the medications, they do better. And this was a venous Williams issue. It wasn't lupus, but it was Sjogren's syndrome, also autoimmune. And she changed her diet and she got her gain back.
Question from Sean. Can you eat a plant-based diet if you have diverticulitis?
Not only can you, but it's the treatment of choice. Diverticulitis, the digestive tract, can sometimes develop little pouches, little crevices. And the old way of thinking, the kind of 1950s thing, said, well, don't eat anything that could get caught in. So they would caution patients, don't eat seaweeds or nuts because they'll get caught in those little crevices. There was never any proof of that at all. It sounded like good advice. But it meant that people then were avoiding high fiber foods and their diverticulosis didn't get better. Diverticulosis means you have the outcoughing. If they get infected, that's diverticulitis. Itis means inflamed. And so what we now recognize is people need to be on high fiber diets, and the fiber king is the beans, and right behind it is vegetables and fruits and whole grains. And the more of those are part of your diet, the more the diverticulitis can heal and are likely to come back.
I want to say hi to Mona as well, who's hanging out, asking questions today in the chat room. Grab a couple more before we wrap things up. How about one from Terry, wondering what the connection is between candida and diet?
For people who don't know what we're talking about, candida is a yeast infection, really, but it can occur in the mouth, it can occur in your throat, it can be a vaginal infection. And people have, since probably the 1980s, been looking at how foods might play a role. Still somewhat speculative if you ask me, but the foods that they have really put their fingers on are sugary foods, also alcohol, also dairy, and these kind of overlap. You don't think of dairy as a sugary food, but the number one nutrient in a glass of milk is milk sugar, lactose sugar. So for many people, leaving those things aside, there can be awful.
We have somebody in the chat room right now interested in exploring the plant-based diet, wondering if that could help with their hypertension. And I'll add to that, given the fact that we're talking a lot about memory today, is there any connection between hypertension and cognitive performance?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I'm sorry you're dealing with hypertension, and your instinct is exactly right. A plant-based diet is where you want to go. First of all, hypertension, high blood pressure, is really destructive to the body in general. It's rough on the heart, it's rough on the kidneys, and it's rough on the brain. If you can imagine, it increases the risk of stroke, but it's just harming the blood vessels day by day by day, have all that pressure in them. You want to bring it down. So, first of all, measure your blood pressure, follow your doctor's advice. If your doctor puts you on medications, take them. You don't want to fool around with it. But, in addition to that, you want to be on a really healthy diet. I'll tell you what that is. And as time goes on, your doctor may decide, gee, I guess you don't need these medications anymore. That can happen. But so follow your doctor's advice. But here's the diet. The diet is a plant-based diet. Why? Because a plant-based diet does not have any animal fat in it. How could that matter?
Promotes
Animal
the
fat.
bodies and the cells.
Cheese fat, pork fat, beef fat. Makes your blood more viscous, more thick, more like oil, less like water. And if your blood is thick, it's harder, it doesn't flow in easily through your arteries and veins, and it takes more effort for your heart to push it along, your blood pressure goes up. So, plant-based diet reduces blood viscosity. Secondly, plants don't have much sodium. When green beans come out of the ground, they just don't carry a lot of sodium with them. That's not their thing. Sodium is a big part of cheese, there's sodium in animal products, but not so much in plants. Except at the factory, they take an innocent potato and put salt in it and then make potato chips. They're adding salt, but in their natural state, plants are low in sodium, high in potassium. And by switching from sodium to potassium, your blood pressure goes down too. But don't let that be all you do. If all you're doing is reducing salt, you're going to cause salt free, that's good for a 3 points on your blood pressure. But do a vegan diet along with it. And then finally, just coming along with it, the healthy low-fat plant-based diet is not only going to make your blood less viscous and bring your blood pressure down for that reason, it's not just naturally low in sodium, especially if you avoid the high sodium foods, but what does it do for your weight? It brings your weight down bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, and the more you get rid of excess weight, your blood pressure comes down even more. And so at some point then you have to say, you are doing fabulous. Let's back you off those medications, you don't need them anymore, and it's a very common thing for people to find a real benefit.